torch to another book a few feet away, holding the match to the pages there. They, too, took on the flames quickly, the edges of the paper glowing orange and shriveling. She lit 3 other spots up, settling back on her heels to marvel at her work. Pushing herself up, she backed towards Winnet to watch as their pyre was engulfed in slow, creeping flames. Sophia had imagined the fire would take on a life of its own, ravaging the mountain of old dusty books quickly, sending flames high to grab onto the curtains before raging onto the bookshelves. This was not the case. The fire was slow, caressing the pages, leaving a trail of glowing amber twinkling along the pages in its wake. The smoke that it belched out was more powerful. Dusty gray wisps blobbed up, forming a pool in the ceiling that was growing and becoming darker. The fire wasn't going to burn fast enough to weaken the structural supports, not before the smoke cloud would permeate the space. Winna coughed beside her. Both women had crouched down to stay out of the smoke, but the fire was already sucking the air from the room. It wasn't going to work. Desperately, Sophia looked around. How could she recover control of the situation? It was getting harder to see, and the smoke hung lower and lower in the room. Her brain was already feeling fuzzy. Winna grabbed at her arm, getting Sophia's attention. She was shaking her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Sophia didn't know if it was despair or the burning smoke. Sophia pointed to the door, her shoulders dropping. They didn't have much time left in the room if they wanted to stay conscious. Winna understood, crawling to the door and slowly pushing the large armchair to the side. Sophia remembered the bronze in the terrarium, the thought returning to her. She clenched her fists and raced close to the flames, holding her breath as she stood up, and grabbed the glass box before crouching low once again and heading for the door. Winna looked confused and panicky, her eyes darting to Sophia, wide and alarmed. Whatever was beyond the door was terrifying, but Sophia had ruined the sanctuary of the library. Despite her earlier words, she didn't actually want to be burned alive. Winna gripped the door handle and pulled, bursting into the hallway with Sophia and a plume of smoke. She slammed the door closed after them before falling to her knees, grasping for air. Sophia was already on the ground. She set their terrarium beside her and was spluttering and coughing, trying to get a breath of clean air. A thin stream of smoke trickled from the gap at the top of the door, but it was mostly held at bay. She looked around the hallway as she continued to gasp for air. There was no one watching or waiting, nothing to grab them and drag them away. Whoever, or whatever had been banging on the door, was gone. "Are you okay?" Sophia was finally able to spit out. Her throat was raw and burned as she spoke. "Are you crazy?" Winna rasped back. "What did you go back for, a box?" "I thought I saw a key in it," Sophia explained, and turned back to look at the terrarium. "A key?" Winna stopped mid-question, cut off by a short coughing fit. Once she had calmed her breathing, she looked back to Sophia and began again. "There are like 100 rooms in this house. How will a key help us now that we started the building on fire? We don't have time to try them all." Sophia only half heard her. She was staring at the brass poking out of the moss. It was indeed a key. A huge, knobbly, old-fashioned key. One that looked like it would be used in an old Frankenstein or Dracula film. She knew that it wouldn't work with most of the rooms in the house. It was a key for an exterior door, one with a grand over-the-top keyhole. It was the moss. A grimace contorted Sophia's face as she realized it actually was not moss. It was moving. It had not been a trick of the low light and dust. Under all the spider webs were thousands of wriggling bodies. Yellow, fat, segmented larvae squirmed around and on top of each other, mostly covering the key, allowing for brief glimpses of the tarnished bronze. Bile forced its way up Sophia's throat, burning the already raw tissue as she leaned over, vomiting. "Oh, God," Winna gagged, hand over her mouth. Her brows were knit as she inspected the terrarium. Lecture forgotten. "What the hell?" She turned away as Sophia spat, trying to clear her mouth. I didn't realize, she tried to explain. It looked like... She trailed off, shaking her head as her stomach threatened to rebel again. Winna frowned, looking up at the ceiling. There's smoke, she said, lamely. We have a key out, though, I'm sure of it. Sophia pushed herself away from the puke, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. I just have to. She clenched her jaw and squeezed her eyes shut. Grab the key. Okay, do it quickly, Winna urged. Sophia gave her a sharp look and crawled around her foamy vomit to the terrarium. She cleared her throat, accidentally causing a short coughing fit. There was no lid on the glass box, just a thick maze of dusty spiderwebs filling the space above the maggots. Sophia took a deep breath, flexing her fingers. They are just gross. It won't hurt me, she said quietly to herself as she stared into the terrarium. The wriggling mass adjusted slightly, revealing another quick view of the key. She held her breath, plunging her hand into the box. Spiderwebs gave way quickly, no longer sticky. They parted easily as her outstretched fingers dove into the larvae. They weren't slimy or sticky, either. The tiny bodies were brainless and wriggled in response to the new stimulus. They were cool and had curled as they dusted along her skin. Her hand was immersed, but quickly found the key she was digging for. She closed her fingers around the shaft, tearing her hand free of the box, flinging a few loose worms out of it, crying out with victory and relief. Winna was beside her, hugging her and laughing as Sophia held up the key. Sophia stretched out her leg, pushing the terrarium away from them. What does it say? She asked, squinting at a curled paper attached to the key with a thin string. It hadn't been visible in the tank, but there was something written in it. Terror, Sophia read. Both women looked at each other. Hope was blooming in Sophia. Think it's a key to the terrace? She asked. Winna smiled back and pushed herself up, offering Sophia her hand. As they sprinted the corner to the ballroom, Sophia felt overwhelmed at the thought they could be free and out of the house. The long walk through the wilderness would have hazards of its own, but when faced with the house and the grinning man, she was willing to take her chances with the bear. They rounded on the corner, pushing through the sitting room into the ballroom. It looked the same as they'd left it. Empty. Waiting. Winna was on her heels as she got to the door. Sophia impatiently pushed her hair out of her face as she leaned down to line up the key with the hole. It slid in easily, but it wouldn't turn. She jiggled it around and tried again. It won't move, she muttered through gritted teeth. Let me try, Winna said, but her voice had risen a few octaves in anticipation. Winna didn't have better luck. She kicked the door, banging on the glass panes with her fists as she yelled out in frustration. She threw the key, watching it land unharmed underneath the chandelier in the center of the room. Sophia was stunned. She stared blankly at the door. I was so sure, she said, tracing the keyhole with her finger. The door was exterior and led onto the terrace. Was the scribbled note a trick? Of course it was too easy. After everything, how could we just walk out of here? Winna kicked the door again. Bitterness coated her words as she said, No, we have to jump through hoops. I'm surprised we didn't have to crawl through all those wormy things to earn our freedom. Sophia shuffled over to retrieve the key and looked at Winna. Maybe not walk out of here, Winna. What if we do have to jump a bit, though? She slipped through the key into her pocket. There's another terrace. One that wouldn't be so easy to get out of, she said. What if this is for the rooftop terrace? End of chapter 20. Hi, Rocky. Come say hi to everybody. Just don't, like, climb where you're not supposed to. Hey. He's not interested. He does not want to. The tail jump scare. Yes, sorry for the tail jump scare. This is Rocky, my troublemaker. Excuse you, Rocky. Come here, please. Come here, please. Hey, dum-dum. Come here, please. No, he's just going to be a creeper, I guess. There's a Bramblin in chat, you guys. I think that's one of the new ones. I don't think I have one of those. No, I don't. I'm going to do a phantom ball. Hey, Rocky, no. You can't go there. You can come here. That's fine. Look, there's lots of place for you to lay down if you want to. You don't need to climb under the mixer. He's like, but what if I do? I can see that he's like wiggling the camera a little bit. Come back to tail. Are you itchy? Here, let me scratch it for you. I think his ear is itchy. Yes, I know. It's hard to scratch there as a cat, isn't it? Twenty-one, 22, 24, 25. So we have 5 more chapters to read tonight. We have a prowling Rocky. Oh, but he has gotten sick of me telling him where he can and can't go. You guys were close to freezing last night? That's wild. We had like basically a blizzard. Like we went from like no snow to like snow drifts. A lot of people were not ready for it. We are definitely coming along though. You know, we're like all decently like prepared. Yeah. We were so lucky we put our snow tires on like the same day that it snowed for the first time. So yeah, it worked out pretty well for us. All right. Why don't we hop on in to chapter 21? We'll definitely have our battle running during this time. I will try to start it promptly. Let's do it. Chapter 21. I mean, to get out of the house would be good, especially if there is a fire that we let slowly eating away at the house. Winna wrung her hands as the women made their way to the foyer and the grand staircase. They took the stairs 2 at a time, and Winna continued. However, I'm not sure stranding ourselves on the roof of a burning building is smart either. How will we get down? Sophia stopped when they got to the top of the stairs. You're right. We don't want to rush into something again because it seems the only option. She turned to the door leading to the willow wing. I can't think of a time when I saw rope or anything we could use. I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but what about a bedsheet rope thing? Like in the movies? Winna scrunched up her face, skeptical. You know Eve was kidding, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think outside the box. You're right. The house seems to be corralling us. I don't want to race into a decision. It might leave us with no other options. The grinning man is lurking around somewhere, so being out in the open feels icky. Not to mention the corpses and whatever else has been after us. Yes, them too, Sophia huffed before continuing. And the rooftop terrace has less places to hide if anything might be waiting for us. We'll go prepared with sheets so we can somehow get down into one of the trees or something. There was a bunch of big old ones around that side of the house. Okay, as long as we don't end in a corner we can't get out of, Winna said. We're kind of in one now, Sophia responded. She pointed to the willow wing, raising her eyebrows at Winna. Yeah, okay, but we stay together. I don't want one of the doors to close behind us. Then we're screwed. Winna led the way, taking a breath before she pushed the door. It creaked open, revealing the familiar hallway. The bedroom windows were framed with sheer curtains that hung long and limp to the floor. They no longer seemed grand. They lost all of their fairy tale magic. Now, both women eyed them with wariness, like someone was waiting in them, curled up in the fabric, ready to grab them. Eli and Noah's room is on the first floor, Winna whispered to Sophia. Cold, dead eyes under the bed. Sophia shivered. She couldn't go in there again. No, she said. Estelle's in each of ours. We need more than one sheet. Let's go, quickly. They raced through the rooms, one holding open the door while the other stripped the bed. It seemed ridiculous to be so cautious when they didn't hear or see anyone else, but there was a persistent feeling that they were being watched, that someone was toying with them, pushing them in any given direction. The absence of the grinning man unnerved Sophia. Around every corner they took, she expected him to be waiting, looming with bottomless empty eyes and his ear-to-ear smile, reaching out to grab her. They left the wing with a bundle of sheets and headed to the main corridor on the second floor. They headed for the narrow staircase at the end of the hall that would take them to the top floor. The smell of smoke hung faint in the air at the base of the stairs. It was the only evidence of their previous endeavors in the library. The fire and most of the smoke stayed trapped on the floor below for now, no doubt devouring the room beneath. It wouldn't take long for it to climb to the rooms above it. They stayed close to each other as they crept up the stairs, taking the corner slowly. Sophia didn't want to race to disappointment again, and what seemed like another brilliant plan was losing its luster as they neared the top. It was the whispering Sophia noticed when they got to the landing. It was indistinct and hard to make out what the words were. Just a persistent whispering coming from the other side of the wall. There was no way she actually wanted to find the origin of the sound, but it filled the space and set her on edge. Thinking back to when she and Eve had consulted the map a few days ago, the other side of the wall was inaccessible from where she and Winna were. It was the servants' quarters. The stairs to get there were different, closer to the kitchen. That's a bit annoying, hey? She mentioned as Winna cleared the top step and headed to the terrace door. She glanced back at Sophia. The whispering, it's off-putting, Sophia explained. Winna looked confused. She paused, concentration blanketing her expression as she was quiet a moment. Sophia, I don't hear anything, but by now we know how this house is. Ignore it. She thought about Estelle, going on and on about the voices she was hearing. Estelle heard whispering. She muttered quietly, You're not going to end up like Estelle. We're getting out together. I don't want to be alone. But I'm freaking out being in the open like this. Get over here. We'd better hope that key works. I'm gonna absolutely lose it. Winnet huffed. It's going to work. Sophia shifted her bundle to rest on her hip so she could hold the sheets with one arm while she dug in her pocket for the key. It has to work. She tried to push whispers to the back of her mind. They grated on her nerves, sending shivers along her hairline. Just like in the ballroom, the key slid easily into the hole. When the key turned, Sophia felt her body lighten as relief flooded through her. Thank God, she breathed. A shadow shifted from the corner of her eye, pulling her attention toward the stairs. It was nothing. Dread settled back over her, dampening her relief as she had felt. Was that something moving again in her periphery? She didn't know whether or not to trust her senses. Sophia imagined the grinning man heading up the doorway, long bony fingers gripping the banister. Or would it be dead Louisa, pulling herself up each step, nails digging into the shabby runner that was peeling off of the wood? Winnet, after you, she said, pushing the handle down, allowing the door to swing open onto the terrace. She tried to make her voice steady, keeping the tremor out of it as she hurried in after her companion. She ignored the shadow that still lurked in the corner of her vision. It was dim outside, gray clouds coating the sky, blanketing the afternoon in hazy gray blue. It was still brighter than in the house, so Sophia squinted as she spun, jabbing the key into the keyhole and turning it, locking herself outside on the terrace. The whispering was fainter, but she still heard it from the other side of the door. Giving her head a brief shake, she turned Winnet at the edge. She was rattling the iron railing like she had when they were last on the roof. Those statues seem more ominous now, don't they? Winnet pondered, and now look at that fog rolling in around the trees. It has a life of its own. Thick and heavy mist swirled around the forest, its wispy fingers winding around the trees, spilling across the yard. We're pretty high up, Sophia observed. A wave of vertigo hit her, and she took a step back, allowing the world to stop throbbing and her eyes to reset. So, we get part of the way down, close to one of the big trees around that ground floor terrace. Sophia had looked over the edge again, trying to figure out a way to get down that wouldn't solely rely on their ability to tie knots in bedsheets. Maybe, when I looked over to where Sophia pointed, a tree is easier to climb than a strip of material. There isn't really anything on the other side, and the garage is too far away to somehow get on the roof. Sophia pointed along the back of the house. Also, I don't think the house would like that. I don't think the roof of the garage would be able to handle that. We'd end up going straight through and impaling ourselves on a rusty tool or something. There's that, Sophia agreed. I know this side doesn't have as much space to work with, but I think it's our best. We just have to find something to tie on the ends of the bedsheets so it won't collapse under a bit of strain. Winnet jiggled the section in front of her again, asking wryly, What, you mean this isn't strong enough to hold me? This isn't strong enough to hold a butterfly. The whole railing is rusted. I don't think we should trust any of it. And these statues are decrepit, but... Winnet looked around. Perhaps the pedestals are solid and heavy enough to use? We don't have a huge list of options, so I think they're the best we got, Sophia agreed, checking the sturdiness of the one near the edge. The pedestal was cylindrical, and patchy moss and grime had filled in some of the vertical grooves running the length. It was heavy and immovable. She and Winnet tried moving it to no avail. Even with a few chunks worn off, it seemed like something they could use as an anchor. Sophia had dropped the bedsheets in a large pile at the center of the terrace. She grunted as she pulled her first knot tight. She tied the edges of the sheet together like a garbage bag and followed suit with the other sheet around the new loop created. She stared at the knot skeptically. I don't know if there's any good way to do this, she muttered. Well, as we aren't in Scooby-Doo, I tend to agree. Winnet had watched Sophia and decided to follow suit. This won't be super long, but hopefully it will get us within tree range. Their good luck streak continued. The sheets, once wrapped around the pedestal, dangled just below where the nearest branch reached out, It looked thick enough to hold each of them. Sophia and Winna looked over the edge. The makeshift rope swayed slightly above the rolling fog. "I feel sick," Winna confided. "It's like we're willingly throwing ourselves off." Sophia's stomach was also in tangles, and her heart was pounding at the thought of lowering herself down. "Let's maybe just get rid of the railing so we don't have to climb over it," she suggested, wobbling it to loosen the rusted bolts and backing it up to kick it a few times. Winna helped, kicking the other junction point. It took a few minutes, but the rust had eaten away enough of the structure. With a grating sound of metal crunching on metal, the rail bent enough to snap and then plummeted down, crashing to the lawn. It lay in a bent, broken heap at the bottom, a gnarled fragment cast away to be forgotten. Once again, the alarming height lay in front of them. The distance from their rope to the tree was daunting. Smoke. Winna was looking behind them, towards the back of the house. Sure enough, smoke was curling up, lazily forming a snaking tendril towards the sky. "We need to get going." Sophia nodded, turning back to the rope. Waves of terror rolled over her. Lowering herself over the edge, no net or climbing gear, nothing to catch her if the rope gave way as she slipped. She'd be dangling 3 stories in open air, relying on her own strength and that of old bedsheets. It made Sophia want to climb up into a ball. She would end up in a broken heap on the grass beside the iron railing. When it was looking over the edge, she whimpered, "I'm scared. Can you go first?" Sophia swallowed. There was little choice. She was going to have to take the risk at some point. "Okay," she mumbled. "Make sure the rope is securely tied." Climb down, swing to the tree. She needed to focus on the tree. Climbing trees was fine. She loved climbing trees as a child. Get to the tree. Sophia got on all fours, turning around beside the sheets and looking over her shoulder as she got closer and closer to the edge of the roof. Winna's face was pale and her lips a grim line as she watched, making sure she was close enough to help guide Sophia if she needed. She grabbed the rope, squeezing it into a tight fist with both hands. "I have no idea what I'm doing," she blurted, her voice barely a squeak as she sat at the edge, ready to drop her legs over to the side. "It's gonna be fine," Winna tried to reassure her. "No, it isn't." Sophia grunted through her teeth. "Shit, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, God." But she couldn't move. Her body had frozen. The thought of stretching out her leg over total nothingness sent her stomach into a spiral. "Brace your legs against the building," Winna suggested. "Hold on with your hands, but don't climb down. Hold firm. Let it slide through your hands. Walk down." "Now you're an expert," Sophia snapped. She knew she looked insane with wide, panicky eyes. Blood drained from her face, but she clenched her teeth. "I don't know. I'm just talking." Winna looked uncomfortable, dropping her gaze. "Okay, I'm gonna do it." Sophia closed her eyes, taking a breath and pushing against her instincts. It was like stepping off a diving board. She knew there would be a drop. She just had to be ready to bear her weight. When Sophia was 13, she and Eve and a few of their other friends went to the K-Days in Edmonton. Sophia adored all the rides and ended up dragging Eve on every ride at least twice. One of her favorites was the fireball. Participants were strapped into their seats, their feet dangling. A large pendulum would swing them high into the sky, only to race back along the track to swing them to the other side. Sophia embraced the feeling of weightlessness, as her stomach seemed to float or squish depending on the direction they were being tossed in. For a moment, her feet dangling, Sophia felt like she was at the apex of the fireball, high up in the air, waiting for the pendulum to begin swinging back toward the ground. Her feet reached forward in hopes of finding the wall. She tightened her grip on the rope as her forearms scraped along the wooden beam. She cried out as she held herself in limbo, desperately stretching for her feet to find some point of contact. It was farther than she expected, so when she finally did reach the wall, she paused